Hello again, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar on Roku Voice. My name is Jonathan Duvall. I'm a technical writer here on the developer relations team, and I'm happy to be hosting another great webinar. Today's edition will feature Chris Gutierrez, the Roku Voice Director of Product Management, who's going to give an update on the latest Roku Voice features. This includes voice-supported profile screens, voice keyboards, and language support. Now, it's worth noting for those developers who attended last year's Developer Summit, some of this material may sound somewhat familiar, but it's definitely worth a review given how critical voice is in empowering customers with a great in-channel experience. So after Chris is done, Dennis Wong, a Roku senior partner engineer, is going to demonstrate how to implement email, password, and PIN voice keyboards in your channel using our voice keyboard sample in GitHub. And when Dennis is done, we'll do a live Q&A session where Chris and Dennis will be joined by the voice engineering team here at Roku to answer your questions, which you can submit in Slido. The Slido link for this webinar is go.roku.com/voice-webinar-QA. The link to the Slido is in the webinar registration form, and it's also in the Zoom chat. So once you ask a question, your fellow attendees will upvote or downvote it, which will help determine whether it gets read on air. If your question is selected to be read on air, we'll ask you to use Zoom's built-in raise hand feature so I can unmute your audio, and then you can ask your question verbally to the team. Now remember, when using this feature, that all attendees will be able to hear your question, and also we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Also, as always, standard disclaimer, we do not comment on our roadmap or make other forward-facing commitments during the Q&A. However, we do welcome feature requests and other suggestions around what would help make the voice experience better for your channels. If you have to leave early or you want to share this session, we will post a recording, as always, on the Roku Developers YouTube channel, Roku Developer Video Portal, and the Roku Developers channel. So without further ado, let's get started. Chris Gutierrez, everyone.
Hi, my name is Chris Gutierrez. I'm here to talk to you about Roku Voice today. And I wanted to present a few slides to explain to you what Roku Voice is, and then to tell you about a few of the things that we've launched recently that you can add to your application. So let's get started. So the first question really is, why should you care about Roku Voice? What is it? Why should I worry about this as an application developer? So as Roku, we provide a platform for you to develop on. We provide the hardware and the software that connect you to your customer. And for most of the interactions, you're building menus on screen, and then your customer can click around with the remote to pick what they want. Voice is the other major way by which your customer can interact with you. So when you're using voice, the customer can tell you exactly what they want. They don't have to select from the menus on screen. And it's particularly helpful in a case where using the remote would be a little bit too slow or too cumbersome. So some good examples of this would be like a sign-in process where somebody would enter their email address. With voice, you can just dictate it. So you could say roku@gmail.com. It also gives you we also provide hands-free support, and that gives you a way for your customer to interact with you when they're busy. Maybe they're doing something with their kids, or they're away from the sofa. And so you could say something like start over or pause. So how does Roku Voice work? The diagram that I'm showing here gives like a real high-level view of the voice system. And at a super high level, your customer speaks to their voice remote. So they'll have a remote, and they'll press the button, and this records the audio and streams it up to the cloud. Our voice service will take this, send it to our speech recognition system, and this will turn the sounds that they made into words. With those words, and so in this example here, the user said show comedies. So we took the show comedy sounds, turned those into words, and we then try to understand what they wanted. And our natural language understanding system will take show comedies and pull out. Show is really a search request here, and comedies is a descriptor, right? A genre descriptor of films, right? So now we're going to be looking for movies and TV shows of genre comedies. So we then take that query that we now understand as text, and we send it to the search system. That comes back with a set of results, which we then push down to the box, and that paints it on the screen. So that's like a real high level overview that shows your speech recognition system taking the sounds and turning them into text, the language understanding system where we take that text and turn it into an intention that we can act upon, and then a integration with the search system. So how does voice interact with my channel? The primary mechanism is a system called, or an interface called RO input. And this is where we as Roku will hand to you what we understood the user asked, right? So some examples, pause, right? Hands-free, they might say, hey, Roku, pause. Or maybe they've got the voice remote and they didn't hear what happened. And they say, can you repeat that? Or maybe, like my wife fell asleep watching the show, doesn't remember what happened. So she's watching the next day and says, start over, and it repeats. In all of these cases, we as Roku will understand the audio, convert that to words, understand what the words meant, and then hand the right intent to you. So let's take a look at that. So this is an example here where they said start over. This is a case where my wife fell asleep watching TV, doesn't remember she's in the episode, she wants to start it over. So starting out at the left, you have the remote, user speaks to it, says start over. That sound gets passed by the remote up through the cloud. Speech recognition system sees it, says, oh, that was start over, hands that to our natural language system, understands, oh, that's a request for the channel to start playback at the beginning. We will hand that down to the box, which hands it to your channel that's running on the Roku box, and you can resume playback. So that's a pretty good example of an RO input case where the voice system, we're giving you what the user said and you're fulfilling it. So I wanted to briefly discuss what's new with Roku OS 11.0. With 10.5, we added keyboards, voice keyboard support. And with 11.0, we've added support for Spanish, German, and Portuguese. Nothing that you have to do on your side. If you've got the keyboard added and the user changes their language setting to Spanish, for example, the voice system will switch to Spanish and we'll be handing you those commands, the Spanish characters and on the voice keyboard will get passed into your channel. The other update with 11.0 is we've made password keyboard a certification requirement for the fall. So we're asking all our partners to please support the voice interface. It's a standard library. You just have to swap out the existing keyboard for the new one. And that will give you voice entry capability on your email and password. We also support this for search as well. So a number of big partners have this available today. If you want to email me, I'd be happy to share some details. But on your search screen, you can use these voice-enabled keyboards where they can say what they're looking for and will pass you the entire query, so they don't have to type with the D-pad. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the features that we added that we've got a number of partners that have implemented. And the first one that I wanted to talk about was profile selection. So we added this feature last year. And if your channel has a profile at the beginning of the customer experience, they've opened your channel up and now they need to pick who it is because you've got personalization or you've got a continue watching feature or something like that within your channel. We added the ability for you as the partner to give us the list of the things that are on screen. And if we hear one of those, we'll hand that back to you. And that lets you pick the profile, allowing a hands-free launch experience, right? So somebody could say, hey, Roku, open your channel name. When that pops up, they could pick the right profile, Jim or George or whatever. We're now shipping our Voice Remote Pro with our Ultra device and with other devices as well. And so as a part of that bundle, you're going to be seeing more of this hands-free out in the field. So how does this work? Here's a quick video demo that shows how this is working in action.
Sarah. Wayne. Third. the sixth one.
Okay, so that was the video demo. And here's how this works in practice. At launch, your channel would register for this API and hand us a number of strings that you would want. And these are going to be the profile names that you want on screen. We have the ability to listen for these and to fuzzy match, the name that we thought we heard to what we think is on screen. And if we hear one of these, we're going to hand it back to you using this RO input voice command. And if you are interested in implementing this, please contact your partner engineer or send me an email, and we'll be happy to help you get started. All right, the next thing that I want to talk about was keyboards. So I wanted to briefly discuss the keyboards that I had mentioned earlier. So how does this work? This is replacing your legacy keyboard node. It's intended to be a drop-in replacement, and there's a bunch of benefits to it. The most important is that it will allow your customers to have a fast or on-device sign-up or sign-in where they can dictate their email address. We'll show a video of that.
ROKUDEV at ROKU.com. ROKUDEV at gmail.com.
It also, as I mentioned earlier, will give you the ability to have voice search in your channel. So if they're on your search page, they can enter whole words and you can fulfill those. And then, we define the base class, but you have this ability to have a JSON formatted keyboard definition file. So you can riff off this basic keyboard to modify, which should be a lot easier to extend for international or for custom cases. Okay, so let's look at a video of how this works.
Asterisk, big G, comma, underscore, exclamation point, backslash, hyphen, P, at, S, $sign.
Okay, so that was the video of how voice keyboards work. And as I mentioned, we support PIN, password, email address, and then a full query search with email and password being cert requirements for default. All right, and then the last bit that I wanted to share was we are continuing to develop support for additional languages. So today we have support for English in US, Canada, and UK. We have Spanish support for Mexico and Latin America, Portuguese support for Brazil, and German support for Germany. And we are continuing to add to these languages as we support additional countries. And stay tuned for the next set of languages that we'll be releasing. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dennis Wong, Senior Partner Engineer, who's going to demo our voice keyboards. Thanks for your time.
Hello, my name is Dennis Wong. I'm a Senior Partner Engineer at Roku. And today I'm going to talk to you about the Roku Voice keyboards. So I'm going to take a look at the sample channel that we have for the voice keyboards. I'm going to go over the required components, the required voice keyboards that are the email keyboard, the password keyboard, and the pin pad keyboard. And by the way, I'm using the Visual Studio with the BrightScript plugin from the Roku community. Okay, so let's start here. And I already have the channel sideloaded on my Roku device. So I'm going to go and show you guys. But you may already have seen this on the, since this sample channel is available. Okay, so initially here's the scene, right? So the scene is basically a label list with the various keyboards. And so first I'm going to, let's take a look at the email keyboard. So as you can tell from the code here, it's fairly simple. So the way to create the, so this is a test node, right? So it's called the dynamic keyboard test node extends group. And it has a child. So the child is the dynamic keyboard with ID, the keyboard. So here in the code, we have the init function. So the init function will take the keyboard, which is the dynamic keyboard. It will set the domain to email, and it will enable the voice on this, on the text edit box. So you just set this text edit box, voice enabled to true. After this, yeah, so there is some other code to center the keyboard on the screen, right? So here's what it is. But as you can tell, it's very simple to create this email keyboard, right? So you just have to set the domain to email and then enable the voice, the text edit box. Okay, so now I'm going to show it to you on the device, the voice keyboard. So here is my the email keyboard on my Roku device. So this is what it looks like, right? So here you're supposed to say one character at a time. So here goes. So B W O N G at gmail.com. Okay, so as you can see, I was able to enter the email here. So now I'm going to go back to the code. So that was the email keyboard. And now I'm going to show you the password keyboard. So the password keyboard is exactly the same thing as the email keyboard. So I gave it a slightly different ID, and I set the initial focus here to the same, to that name, right? And then I look for that ID, that keyboard ID. Then I set the domain to password, and I set the text edit box voice enabled to true. And then there's the same code to center the keyboard. So I'm not going to show it to you on the sample. It's exactly the same. And for the password, you also enter one character at a time. So the next one I'm going to show to you is the pin pad. So the pin pad is also very similar. Is one of the standard voice keyboards. So you just create a dynamic pin pad, and here I gave the ID, the pin pad. So now in the init function, I just find the node for the pin pad, and same as before, I set the voice enable in the text edit box to true. So and then there's the center code that's the same as in the previous keyboards. So now I'm going to show it to you on the device. So here's the sample on the local device. So here is the dynamic pin pad test. So here I'm going to go on my microphone and I'm going to enter a pin. So it's let's see, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, so I only needed to say four of them. Okay, and then here you go. So this is it for the the email, the password, and the pin pad. Those are the ones that are required for certification. And as you can see, it's very simple to enable to use the voice enabled keyboards for those cases. Next, I will demo an example of the dynamic custom keyboard. It's not a cert requirement, but it can be useful in some use cases, as it enables developers to create a voice-enabled keyboard that has a custom layout. The dynamic custom keyboard has a voice edit node to display the string of characters provided via text or voice entry. It also has a dynamic key grid. It also has a dynamic key grid node that provides keyboard functionality. In this example, the user can enter the username and the address. So the custom address keyboard extends the dynamic custom keyboard. Let's see. So in the init function here in the custom address keyboard, we can specify the key definition file, which is a JSON file. So there is this key definition URI that's set to this data custom address kdf.json. So if we go to this file, so we'll see that there are grids, and each grid has a mode and has a number of rows, and each rows has a number of keys. So there are several modes. The first one is the name upper, and then there is the next one is the name lower for lowercase, and there are others, full upper, and then full lower. So there is all these keyboard types, city, state, upper, right, and so on. So coming back to here, so this defines the custom address keyboard. And then you see here there are several modes. There is the name lower, name upper, full lower, full upper, city state, upper, city state lower, and the zip. So these are the modes. Yeah, so now we go to the custom address keyboard test. So this uses the custom address keyboard. So here there is the children, and one of the children is the custom address keyboard, and there is a number of labels on the right side of the screen. So as you can see here, we define several fields. For the fields to the right, there is the There is the field to enter the name, the address, apartment, building, city, state, and zip code. And then each keyboard has a domain. So the name and the address are generic, where you can enter full words, and then the the apartment is alphanumeric, and the zip code is numeric. Okay, so now let's go to the demo. So here we have the same sample we were showing you before. And so let's go to the custom address keyboard test. So here we have it. So we have the name. So now I'm going to enter the name. So my name, Dennis Wong. And next for the address, 1155 Coleman Avenue. Next, building 2. Let's do this again. So building 2. And then the city, San Jose. State, California. And the zip code, 95030. And there you have it. So this concludes the demo for the custom address keyboard, which is an instance of the dynamic custom keyboard. And now I'll pass it back to Jonathan for the Q&A session. Thank you.
So thank you so much. We're going to open things up to Q&A. So Chris, Dennis, and Shane, you guys can go ahead and turn on your video and unmute your audio. And so we're going to go through the questions, any questions that we got through the webinar, which looking right now in the Slido, we haven't gotten any questions. But please, now's a great time while you've got the team. There we go, there's questions. So we'll try to ask the team as many questions as we can. Feel free to continue writing in your questions and don't be shy about using the raise hand feature. Okay, so the first question we've got is accessibility support for the dynamic keyboard built in.
Yeah, I could take that. I believe all scene graph components, including the dynamic dictation keyboard, supports accessibility through hitting the start button on the remote 4 times, and the readability will, the screen will kind of use a robot voice to read out the dictation that's been done so far and the keys on the keyboard as they get focused.
Excellent. Let's see.
There is also a row audio guide component if the channel wants to like add a custom audio guide support.
Excellent. Thank you, Shane. So what other questions do you guys have? This is a great opportunity to interact with the engineering team. So if there's something you've wanted to ask, there's some arcane type question, feel free to ask. This is a great opportunity to interact with the team.
Additionally, I think maybe we could throw Chris's email up, and any more technical bug related things that happen implementing these keyboards, I think you can send to Chris and he can forward it to me or Dennis or Jonathan to handle. One other thing I'd like to note is, there's a couple fields that you can customize. For example, if you wanted to do a zip code in England, who has postal codes that have letters in them, there's a voice input regex filter where you can give a regex string to support filtering out different characters. So you can basically make it a letter by letter keyboard that accepts, say 0 through 9 and A, B, C, and D only. So you don't have a incorrect input.
Cool. Oh, so Brian is got a great question here. Any tips for debugging why voice input isn't working? When in the case that it's not working, what are the good basic debugging steps that we should try?
Yeah, I mean, you could try, it's kind of a voice input isn't working. Was this a voice dictation isn't working, or a row input response isn't working, or I think we would, but generally, if voice input isn't working on a keyboard, I would check the voice enabled field and set it to true. I would make sure that a common fault that happens with developers is they get in this habit of iterating very fast, and their remote might go to sleep. And we actually disable voice dictation on keyboards where there's not an active voice remote being used. And so I would, so occasionally you might have to, press the up button or down button on the remote before starting your channel up to make sure that the keyboard actually does get voice enabled, even if the field is set to true.
Excellent. Brian, was there any specific scenario? Like if I'm going to allow you to, I'm going to actually unmute you. Brian, if you want, you can chime in. Is there any specific scenario that you've encountered that where you've needed help or anything that you want to ask the team?
So the biggest thing I've seen, at least in a lot of the apps I've worked on that I haven't seen like in the example, is like if you try and set voice enabled the true right away, it seems like it pretty much just seems to ignore it. But if you wait until you actually set focus, that's usually the spot where I've had good luck with it. But yeah, I wasn't sure if there was any other steps or things like that for helping with when you do run those cases. One of the other things I've seen sometimes is, like, for example, like the first time you deploy with a develop sideload build, and then the next one might will succeed after that, but that first one fails.
Yeah, there's kind of an intelligence in the system that determines exactly when the key, like the voice enabled field is like, please enable. If it's set to true, it's like, please enable voice if able. And there's various situations that you might not want the voice to be enabled. So we can kind of handle those for you. One example is we try to detect, there's a large number of Roku TVs out there that ship with a remote that might not support voice dictation. So we need to be able to not show the voice UI in those cases. Or if another detection is if you're not connected to the internet, we disable voice dictation, or if you're in a region that doesn't support dictation yet. So another one is that the voice remotes will, if you're not actively using it, let's say like voice dictation is not supported on a mobile remote, for example, because you could use the dictation built into the phone. So we'll try to detect that. And because the voice remote's not being actively used, we'll not enable it either. I think the focus hack to wait till the keyboard gets focused to enable it to true. I'm guessing it's the most likely situation that a voice remote is actively being used after deploying it from the website, because you just hit the remote button to give it focus. So the voice remote is definitely being active. But if you have the voice keyboard as like the first thing shown after a channel launch because you're actively hacking on it, developing it on it, and you haven't touched your voice remote in a while, it won't voice enable. And this isn't a case that a normal user would ever run into, but it is a case that the developers run into often.
Cool. Excellent. So Brian has a follow-up question. Does dictation work on devices without a linked voice remote within the iOS or Android Roku app?
I'll take that. We have not enabled that. And the reason why is you've got a great mobile keyboard. You've got your phone in your hand. And so it is something we've thought of, but I think in the case that you've got a full keyboard available, that's probably faster than dictation. This is really meant to solve the problem of entering details using the D-pad. and your thumbs, which is pretty slow. So it's not something that we've done, but we might do it in the future.
Cool. Excellent question. All right. Does anyone else have any other questions? As we're going to wrap this up, if there are none. This is your guys' last chance to take advantage of the team being here. All right. If there are no other questions, we'll conclude like I always do. I will remind you guys that thank you guys so much for showing up and attending. A replay of this webinar will be on the Roku Developers YouTube channel, the Roku Developers video portal, and also the Roku Developers channel on device. That'll be posted within probably the next day or so. So then make sure you guys stay tuned, look for announcements on the Roku Developers blog, Developers Slack, and the Developers Forum for announcements on our next webinar next month. We're still trying to finalize the topic. But once again, thank you guys so much for attending. Panelists, thank you so much for showing up and participating and answering the great questions that we got. And hope you guys have a great Monday. Thank you.